This is the most brutal murder method in the assassin world. Even a woolly mammoth couldn't endure half a dose of the drug, let alone a young, beautiful, seductive woman. The young woman saw herself about to become a ghost under the needle. But, unexpectedly at that moment, the assassin froze. He didn't expect his target to be a pregnant woman. Moreover, many strange images appeared in his mind. It was precisely when he was distracted that the bodyguards noticed something unusual and rushed in to surround him. But the assassin showed no fear. Instead, his eyes revealed a fierce, beast-like glint. As someone who licks blood from the knife's edge, living and dying in an instant, the few bodyguards in front of him were nothing. He easily subdued them. If they had obediently surrendered, they might have lived a few more years. But they rushed to their deaths, so he couldn't be blamed for his brutal actions. He wrapped a small scarf around his arm, then around the neck, and then strongly pushed with his shoulder. With a crack, the bodyguard suffocated on the spot. The last bodyguard also did not die decently. He swung his hand and fired a bullet mercilessly. At that moment, the young woman thought she would also die on the spot, but unexpectedly, the assassin walked straight to the airplane compartment, took out a parachute, and put it on. After putting on a gas mask, he used his strength to open the airplane compartment door and jumped down without saying a word. Not long after the assassin left the plane, the man in the theater heard a loud noise outside. When he shone his flashlight around, he discovered someone hanging from a tree, so exhausted that his limbs were deprived of oxygen and his head was dizzy. Realizing that the situation seemed dire, the man quickly rescued him. Since this was a deep mountain forest, the nearest hospital was hundreds of kilometers away. The man could only call a doctor for help. While on the phone looking for identification, he accidentally found a small package in his jacket pocket. When he opened it, inside was that deadly poison. Only the poison had been destroyed by the assassin, but at that moment, how could the man know that? Moreover, looking at the used vial of medicine, perhaps this was his lifeline. So, without hesitation, he opened another vial, filled the syringe. After preparing everything, the man didn't hesitate to inject it into the assassin's arm. With such a dose, not to mention whether the assassin could endure it, even a T-Rex would immediately blow bubbles. Perhaps it was due to the fighting fire with fire method taking effect, or his constitution was as strong as an ox. The assassin gradually regained consciousness, with more strange images flashing in his mind. As soon as he opened his eyes, the man who was leaning down to check on him was immediately grabbed by the neck. If he hadn't, in a critical moment, managed to say mercy, he would surely have been strangled. However, when faced with the man's question, the assassin knew nothing, seemingly having completely forgotten his identity. The kind man even wanted him to rest more, but at that moment the assassin refused, stood up, and intended to leave. As a result, he hadn't taken 2 steps before he fainted again. Early the next morning, the man took the now conscious assassin to the scene of the accident. Although the untouched parachute was still hanging from the treetop, he had no memory of it, as if he had appeared out of thin air. Just as the assassin was worried about his identity, a strange jeep drove up. The man said that this might be the rescue team he had called. So, he proactively approached them to describe the situation. As a result, after talking, they learned that the man and the assassin were from the same company and had come to pick him up. Hearing this, the assassin, without a second thought, prepared to follow them. However, on the way, the bored assassin looked down and saw that his sleeve had been torn. He didn't know when. What surprised him even more was that there was a barcode tattoo on his arm. Could he be 47? To verify his guess, he asked the man next to him for his phone, but was immediately refused. At this point, the assassin felt no shame and turned his attention to the phone being used for navigation in front. But when he tried to reach for it, he was pulled back by the other two. The assassin glanced at them with cold eyes, then stubbornly tried to take it again. But of course, he failed. As the saying goes, if there's a first time, there's a second time, but not a third or fourth. After being stopped repeatedly, the assassin immediately became enraged and launched a series of attacks on the two ignorant men. Pinned to the ground, the others knew he was strong but didn't expect him to be this strong. Now, let alone outnumbering him, they didn't even know if they would survive. One was strangled to death, the other was mercilessly thrown out of the car. At this point, the only surviving driver still wanted to fight back, but was disarmed in a flash. Now, without any support, he could only obey the assassin's commands, obediently stopping the car by the roadside. With a gunshot, all three colleagues died. But just as the assassin left gracefully, another group of people arrived at his benefactor's house. After learning that the assassin had lost his memory, that person just coldly looked at him and told the man to drink a cup of cold tea. Only after witnessing him drink it all did he smile, stand up, and leave. However, at this moment, the man had no idea that his life was about to end. At the same time that the man suddenly died, the assassin also fell to the roadside table, unconscious from poisoning. If not treated promptly, he would die within 24 hours. Fortunately, his strong physique allowed him to overcome the intense pain. However, as he wandered aimlessly, he happened to meet a beautiful girl talking on the phone. This was also what he desperately needed at the moment. So, before she could hang up, he quickly snatched the phone. The hot-tempered girl, seeing this, how could she tolerate it? She immediately drove after the assassin, who was slowly walking away. But no matter how she begged or cursed, he didn't care. All his attention was focused on the phone. At this moment, the girl only wanted to run him over, but she was afraid of getting into legal trouble. Helplessly, she got out of the car to fight him. However, when the girl unleashed her proudest old tree lady root technique, she was unexpectedly grabbed by the collar and pulled down by the assassin. With a strong blow to the back of the neck, the girl immediately fainted. At first, she thought the assassin wanted to have some fun before dying, but unexpectedly, after throwing the girl into the car, he began to study the barcode on his arm. But when the phone scanned the image, what appeared was not product information, but a mysterious location on the map. Although he didn't know what was hidden there, to quickly clarify his identity, the assassin still decided to go there to investigate. However, upon arrival, he found it to be a completely abandoned factory. Other than crumbling buildings, there was nothing else. If it weren't for the red warning sign at the end of the road, identical to the symbol displayed on the phone, no one would think of coming here to look for clues. At the same time, the girl also woke up from her coma. Discovering that she had been brought to such a desolate place, she guessed that the phone thief must also be nearby. So without hesitation, she pulled out a rolling pin, determined to teach that scoundrel a lesson. But when she actually entered the abandoned building, she became a little anxious, fearing that a few big guys would come out and turn her into their delicious meal. However, at that moment, several loud noises suddenly echoed from upstairs. Following the hint on the phone, the assassin found the marked location. When he took out the package inside, he not only found a thick stack of cash, but also a loaded pistol. Although he didn't know the purpose of the 18-cord phone, the photo of the man with the mustache was very noticeable. Just as he was trying to remember something, the woman secretly attacked from behind. But before the rolling pin could hit his head, she was grabbed by the neck. Seeing the girl about to be strangled, fortunately, the assassin regained his senses in time thanks to his conditioned reflexes. Thus, the girl luckily kept her life. But because her recent actions were a bit too aggressive, she had completely lost all courage to apologize. The young man quickly threw out a stack of money and returned the stolen phone. However, just as he was about to say something, noisy car sounds suddenly came from outside. Looking through the window, he saw a group of unknown assassins arriving. Feeling something was wrong, the young man quickly led the girl to escape. However, because too many people came this time, even though they had escaped the pursuit inside the building, they still found it difficult to get past the guards at the door. Fortunately, at this moment, the girl came in handy, successfully attracting the attention of two people with her honey trap. The young man took the opportunity to deal with the guard behind, while the man being provoked didn't notice anything unusual at all. But even if he had reacted in time, it would have been too late. He was easily subdued by the young man with a light hand. Both guards were sent to the afterlife by him. However, no sooner had the two dealt with the immediate trouble and left the abandoned factory than the 18-cord phone suddenly rang. The young man, a little suspicious, picked up the phone, and the caller was an old man. He not only called the young man by his correct name, Anton, but also said that he was his best creation. Because he had accidentally been injected with a deadly poison, he had lost all his memories. If he was not detoxified within 24 hours, he would die from the poisoning. Anton knew that the old man's words were not a threat, but still threw the phone out the window because he understood that his fate was his own, not heaven's. Instead of living a life controlled by others, it was better to find his own way to live. If it couldn't be used for him, then destroy it. This was not a simple test of endurance, but a competition to see who had a colder heart. As the flames grew higher, the palms of his hands already emitted the strong smell of grilled meat, but his hands continued to lower. The man, though sweating profusely from the pain, gritted his teeth and endured. The young man next to him was almost scared to death, not expecting the opponent to be so cruel. Seeing that he couldn't compare at all, he wanted to give up. But the young man didn't know that this was not a simple experiment. Only the survivors could leave here. When the man secretly approached from behind, a cross chokehold was already tightening around the young man. If it weren't for the camera recording the entire process, you would never know how crazy this old man was. The old man, named Tang Bosi, was a cruel and cold-blooded scientist. To complete his experiment, he deceived a group of young men in their 20s into becoming test subjects. After paying the price of hundreds of young men's deaths, he actually researched a miraculous drug. It could not only cut off human emotions and desires, but also multiply physical functions, turning them into super warriors like Captain America. However, the success rate of this drug was extremely low. Most test subjects died from exploding, and even if they overcame the extreme pain, they would become bloodthirsty madmen or mutated eunuchs. But the old man's experiment was not a complete failure. Anton was the most perfect work of art in his hands, and also the secretly trained top assassin. Originally, he was tasked with assassinating a beautiful female CEO, but ultimately, for some unknown reason, he abandoned this mission. What was even more unbelievable was that the deadly poison that was supposed to be injected into the woman's body was mistakenly injected into his bloodstream, turning into glucose. When Anton, who had lost his memory, knew he was about to die, he showed no anxiety or impatience, but happily enjoyed a scallion pancake. The only clue at the moment was the photo in the package, but he knew nothing about the identity of the man in the photo. Just as Anton was at a dead end, Jella suddenly took out her phone and showed him the information she had found. It turned out that the man's identity was not ordinary. He was not only a famous local businessman, but also a benevolent philanthropist. Anton guessed that the opponent was his assassination target, and the employer must know the location of the assassin. Organization. To deal with the deadly poison in Anton's body, he prepared to talk to the businessman, but unexpectedly, at that moment, two men with murderous aura appeared at the door. Anton thought they were also assassins sent by the old man. To prevent this only clue from being destroyed, he prepared to lure the two men to a secluded corner by himself, then help the businessman solve the immediate problem. The young man, followed by two fierce assassins, thought he would pull out a gun to fight back, but unexpectedly, he took out a photo to intimidate the opponent. The outcome, needless to say, the amulet had no effect. Instead, he was subjected to a 13-road kicking attack by the opponent. It's true that a hooligan who knows martial arts is feared by everyone, let alone in a disadvantageous situation of 2 against 1. The man used despicable tactics and still wanted to fight back, but was beaten even more brutally. Under the tacit cooperation of the two, the young man was beaten until he had no strength to resist and immediately vomited 3 liters of blood. Seeing that he was no match, the young man decided that the best-laid schemes of mice and men often go awry, and intended to run away. But the opponent gave him no chance, playing with him like a hawk catching a chick. He was once a top assassin at the pinnacle of the pyramid. Just because he accidentally lost his memory, he now found himself in such a miserable situation. With continuous stomps of leather shoes on his face, the young man was beaten until his flesh and blood were mixed, and he could die at any moment. But at this critical moment, fortunately, a heroine arrived in time to rescue the young man who was about to go to heaven. But it was also because of her kindness that she was grabbed by the assassin by the collar, subjected to a heaven-piercing cannon, and thrown into a pile of sand, rolling. As the saying goes, a good man doesn't fight with women, let alone when the opponent is a beautiful woman in a rage. The young man bravely stood up and continuously attacked with a small cudgel. At this moment, not only the beautiful woman but even the assassin who was stabbed was stunned, not expecting something used to crack eggs to have such power. The assassin, exhausted, still wanted to drag someone to their death with him, but the young man gave him no chance. With a straight stab, he plunged the entire cudgel into the man's body. Thus, the world lost another cruel butcher. The other one also could not escape a tragic fate. Before he could fully recover, his head was tightly covered with a plastic sheet, and under the young man's cross chokehold, he couldn't even last half a minute before going to the afterlife. When all the troubles were perfectly resolved, the young man was also curious about his true identity. He didn't understand why he had provoked such a powerful enemy. What surprised him even more was that his rescuer was this foolish woman. Not long after Anton dealt with the 2 assassins, the businessman's group also arrived at the square outside. When they saw the 2 assassins had died, he immediately had a bad premonition. But Anton didn't expect that the businessman was an accomplice of the old man. The 2 assassins sent were not to assassinate him, but to capture Anton and bring him back. As things became more and more unpredictable, the beautiful female CEO also fell into a difficult situation. Faced with questions from several agents, she had no idea who wanted to harm her because both she and her husband were successful businessmen, and there was no one else besides their competitors. Just as things came to a dead end, Anton, who had lost his memory, made a major breakthrough. Jella's boyfriend had invented an application that could quickly find detailed identity information by recognizing facial images online. Immediately, after Anton's photo was uploaded, not only his personal history from several years ago was found, but his specific home address was also precisely marked. Seeing that the mystery of his identity was about to be solved, the two immediately set off for Anton's house. But what they didn't expect was that Anton was not a cold-blooded assassin, but a multi-award-winning athlete. Looking at the dusty photos, he once had a beautiful wife. It's just that for some reason, the two had separated many years ago. Just as Anton was trying to recover his memory, 2 agents received a tip from the public saying that dangerous elements had been found in the residential area. Therefore, as soon as Anton and Jella went out, they were handcuffed on the spot. But time was running out, so they had to stand up and resist. Although they didn't know the mastermind's motives, the fact that he could reach inside the police department proved how terrifying his power was. After Anton dealt with the 2 agents, he understood that he couldn't stay here long, so he and Jella immediately got into the car, preparing to find a safe place to discuss further. It's just that the location they chose this time was a bit wrong. They went to a motel next to the train station. Seeing the 2 dusty people, the motel staff immediately guessed the trick inside. But when he handed over the room key, Anton also skillfully gave him a large banknote. Seeing this, the motel staff immediately understood, so he gave them a mysterious room and guaranteed that their trip would definitely be successful. When the two curiously opened the room door, not only Jella but even Anton, who had once licked blood from the knife's edge, was shocked. All kinds of torture devices were laid out all over the room, and 18 kinds of weapons were also on the walls. At this moment, Anton was completely stunned. How could an innocent person like him see this kind of high technology? Fortunately, Jella was experienced and immediately demonstrated the miraculous uses of various weapons to Anton. On one side was the blonde girlfriend he had no impression of. On the other was a seductive, open-minded, and liberal beauty. At this moment, Anton was completely in a difficult situation. Should he easily let go of the pristine white bathrobe? Just as he was in a great headache, Jella suddenly stood up, crisscrossing. Jella had just received a call from the gang, asking her to bring ransom money to exchange for her ex-boyfriend. If she didn't arrive on time, they would directly tear up the ticket. Anton originally didn't want to get involved in this, but it was really not good for a small girl to go there alone. Moreover, she had saved his life, so he secretly followed her in case Jella got into trouble. His concern was indeed not wrong. After confirming the cash in Jella's bag, the man actually let her get into the car to change the transaction location. Before leaving, Anton had carefully instructed her not to act on her own no matter what. But unexpectedly, this foolish woman still made the lowest mistake. Seeing Jella get into the car and leave, Anton, helpless, had to pretend to collide with the gang's car behind. When the opponent hurriedly got out of the car to check the situation, he used the gun in his hand to force him to obey. When the car behind continuously signaled, their accomplices seemed to realize there was a problem and slowly stopped the car by the roadside. But what they didn't expect was that the person who got out was not their accomplice, but a strange man holding a weapon. The gang in the car, seeing that the situation was not good, even wanted to use Jella's life to threaten them. But they didn't know that the opponent was 100 times more ruthless than them. He didn't even give them a chance to exchange hostages, but directly shot and killed the unfortunate person in front of him. After the two gang members died one after another, Anton successfully rescued Jella, who was in danger. But to redeem her ex-boyfriend, the two had to bravely venture deeper into the tiger's den. After a series of ruthless tactics, the surviving small boss dared not say a word. He not only led them back to the hideout, but also proactively used his face to trick the guards at the door. It's just that Anton didn't expect the entire camp to be surprisingly large. To ensure Jella's safety, he could only temporarily hide her in a dumpster, while he alone went in to search. But they wouldn't even dream that someone could secretly infiltrate. It was precisely because of this ingrained thinking that Anton entered as if there were no one there. He not only knew the structure of the entire camp, but also easily found Jella's ex-boyfriend. The mission was easily completed. Anton told the young man to wait at the door for their reunion while he went to pick up Jella, who was hiding. But unexpectedly, Jella had already been discovered and ran away in a panic. She happened to meet her ex-boyfriend. To avoid being pursued by the army behind, the two could only run around like headless flies. As a result, they accidentally broke into someone else's transaction location, seeing the opponent about to kill them to silence them. Fortunately, at this moment, someone fired a cold shot from behind. Before everyone could react, many gang members died immediately. When the gunshots gradually stopped, Anton also walked out from the dark corner. Jella was indeed not mistaken. In times of crisis, this man was the most reliable. It's just that this was only the appetizer. When a group of tall, burly thugs appeared, Anton truly showed them what it meant to be a guardian of the pass, whom tens of thousands of people could not overcome. Since the opponents were not using lethal weapons, Anton also didn't want to take advantage. So, with just a pair of calloused fists, he directly rushed into the opponent's encirclement. At first, everyone wanted to play cat and mouse, but the more they fought, the colder they felt. This guy was indeed as brave as a god, easily defeating a bunch of accomplices. Especially when everyone saw Anton's cold eyes, they were so scared that they almost wet their pants. Jella hid outside, fearing he was in danger, so she directly cut off the power in the base. This operation immediately increased Anton's strength exponentially. He was originally a god of death walking in the shadows. This dark and murky assassination game was child's play for Anton. He almost effortlessly dealt with all the thugs. At this moment, the guards, hearing the commotion, rushed over and still wanted to stop him, but they ultimately overestimated their own strength. Even though Anton was exhausted from continuous fighting, he was not something these weaklings could insult. Each person only needed one move to completely shatter their illusions. But Anton and Jella had not been back long when, in a daze, he regained a bit of his past memory. It turned out that his girlfriend didn't leave him for no reason, but had unfortunately died in a car accident, and the culprit of that tragedy was none other than him, this inhuman butcher. Seeing Anton's eyes begin to darken, Jella quickly advised him to cheer up, but Anton's heart had completely cooled, giving up all faith in life. To help him overcome this difficulty, Jella asked her ex-boyfriend to delve into the inner workings of the assassin organization. As a result, they didn't find the assassin organization, but found Anton's old comrade in arms. They had once participated in some secret experiment together. Afterward, the comrade in arms chose to retire due to injury, while Anton completely disappeared. At this moment, with such important clues, Jella quickly ran back to inform Anton, and at the same time, through the internal website, found a phone number and proactively helped them arrange a meeting. It's just that the course of events far exceeded everyone's expectations. Although Anton met his old brother and learned some past stories from him, their true relationship was only a superficial acquaintance, because a small red dot had been aimed at Anton's neck for a long time. Seeing this special sign, the good brother next to him seemed to be afraid of being shot and splattered with blood, so he stepped back 2 paces. But what confused him was that a long time had passed, and he still hadn't heard a gunshot from afar. At the same time, the sniper hidden in the shadows seemed to receive some order. After carefully listening to the instructions in his earpiece, he quietly turned off the safety catch of his rifle. When the good brother saw the red dot behind his neck disappear, he seemed to guess that the mastermind had other intentions. But the angry good brother didn't want to miss this good opportunity, so he didn't hesitate to take action and commit murder. A strange car accident not only killed the 8-month pregnant woman on the spot, but Anton, who was in the driver's seat, also almost died. As he was about to fall into a coma, he vaguely saw a figure get out of the car opposite, then walk over to Anton. That person grabbed his wrist, checked his pulse, then turned and left as if nothing had happened. When Anton woke up from his coma, he saw an old man with gray hair standing in front of him, continuously shining a flashlight on him. Especially when he saw him holding a syringe and drawing medicine, many strange images suddenly appeared in his mind. At that time, also in this situation, after injecting some unknown liquid, his body not only became increasingly strong, but his whole person also became colder. Even a group of comrades in arms who had been together day and night were brutally strangled to death by him. Afterward, he became a top assassin. As long as he personally accepted the mission, no one could see the sunrise the next day. Even if they were lucky enough to escape, he would use more brutal methods to kill the target. When Anton's fragmented memories were put back together, he immediately understood his tragedy. So, without hesitation, he rushed to kill the old man. But unexpectedly, the opponent's syringe was faster than Anton's movements. He immediately injected all the medicine into Anton. In just a blink of an eye, Anton's eyes began to become dull, and his clenched hands slowly slid down, once again becoming a puppet controlled by others. As for the good brother who brought him here, the old man not only kept his promise to give him a box of medicine as a reward, but also solemnly guaranteed that he would also become a super warrior. It's just that the man didn't expect, even until his death, that in the old man's eyes, he was just a piece of trash that could be discarded at will, let alone a petty person who betrayed trust and was fundamentally not worth cultivating. At the same time, Mark also appeared at the CEO's house. Based on their level of familiarity, they must have known each other for many years. But unexpectedly, just as the two were happily chatting, Mark began to make advances. It turned out that Mark and the CEO were originally a couple. Due to problems between their companies, conflicts arose, leading to divorce. Now old flames rekindled, and the fire near the straw quickly caught. However, not long after Mark left, the CEO saw a strange sight. The bodyguard looked possessed, his expression dull. Especially after she called his name, his eyes immediately flashed with a fierce glint, glaring at her. Before the CEO could understand what was happening, she was tightly grabbed by the neck by him. Fortunately, in a panic, she struggled free. Otherwise, she would have been strangled. The CEO ran into the kitchen, grabbed a dining knife, and locked herself in the storage room. She thought this would avoid the pursuit, but unexpectedly, the bodyguard, seeing the door wouldn't open, began to frantically punch and kick it. When the thick wooden door was punched through a large hole and the locked doorknob was about to be opened, fortunately, security forces heard the noise and rushed to rescue the CEO from her predicament. However, the entire incident was too strange, let alone the fact that the opponent was her trusted subordinate. No matter what, this sudden event should not have happened. To find out the truth behind it, the CEO opened all the surveillance cameras. The result was a shocking discovery. It turned out that the real culprit was Mark. The bodyguard began to become extremely abnormal after Mark patted him on the shoulder, looking as if he was being controlled by someone. Since the truth was clear, the CEO immediately went to Mark, questioning him whether the previous assassination attempt on the plane was also orchestrated by him. Seeing that the truth was completely exposed, Mark no longer hid anything and strangled the CEO, intending to eliminate her. But unexpectedly, he was attacked from behind by the seductive secretary. The small stun baton relentlessly struck him. Seeing Mark collapse, the CEO still didn't calm down, grabbed the stun baton and continued to torture him until his thick chest hair was burned to ashes before she stopped. However, at this moment, an assassin quietly approached. By the time the two discovered him, it was too late. The CEO was also taken back to the laboratory. The main act was about to begin. The old man had now contacted many terrorists, preparing to sell the superweapon in his hand at a high price. And what he was selling was not ordinary merchandise, but this mysterious man holding a tray. Because he was upgraded and improved, with a new generation of drugs, he had become a colder killing machine. The CEO was now completely stunned, especially when she saw him take out a small syringe. She immediately identified this person's true identity. He was Anton, the one who had unsuccessfully attempted to assassinate her on the plane before. It's just that the CEO didn't expect that when the syringe was about to be plunged into her neck, Anton winked. Could there be a plot twist? At the same time, Jella had quietly sneaked into the adjacent laboratory. When she saw the signal Anton sent, she jumped onto the experimental table behind and sprayed a thick mist into the alarm device. It turned out that everything was under Anton's control. The obedience he had shown earlier was all fake. In fact, he had long planned this counter-assassination in reverse. His goal was to completely destroy the old man's laboratory and take revenge. However, after dealing with a few annoying flies, Anton discovered that the old man had escaped. Anton was about to pursue him when another barbed wire jumped out and immediately engaged him in a life-and-death battle. However, just as Anton parried the opponent's fatal blow, he accidentally saw the special pattern on his arm. He remembered the scene of the car accident years ago. The person who helped him also had a pair of wings exactly like that. It turned out that everything that happened was not accidental, but a deliberate conspiracy. Anton angrily clenched the opponent's blade, completely looking like he was risking his life. Just as the opponent slowly pulled out his dagger, preparing to completely end the battle, Anton, using the force, pushed the entire blade deep into the man's body. With the brutal death of the culprit, Anton felt no joy, because the real mastermind had escaped. However, as Anton searched room by room, he was suddenly cut on the ankle by a sharp blade, and the attacker was none other than the old man hiding. As the ancients said, strike while the iron is hot. The old man naturally understood this principle, so without a word, he stabbed Anton through the shoulder. But he ultimately fell back into the villain's inherent bad habit of talking too much, useless chatter, allowing Anton to prepare for a counterattack early. And when the old man's attack completely failed, Anton also threw a heaven-shattering punch that immediately incapacitated the old man. As the saying goes, give someone a taste of their own medicine. He wanted all the suffering he had endured to be personally tasted by the old man. It's just that his methods would be more brutal than the old man's. When the shattered vials were successively plunged into the old man's face, Anton only then tiredly stopped. He didn't want to continue venting his anger, but the old man had been stabbed into a porcupine. Even the Jade Emperor himself would find it difficult to save him. Instead of ending his life quickly, it was better to let him slowly writhe in agony. The story ends here. The value of a movie lies in its reputation, and the value of a movie review lies in its feeling. Today's story ends here. Thank you all for watching. What do you think of this movie? Please comment below.